Hey everyone, this is Ross. In today's video, I'm going to teach you guys a pruning technique that we can use in our figs. It's called rejuvenation pruning. And this is actually a technique that we can do either during the dormancy process or actually when these trees are awake. It's called rejuvenation pruning. And this is a technique that really has never been talked about on YouTube. So if you're hearing it here, you're hearing it here first. This is a technique though that is discussed in detail in Pons' book, and Pons really recommends this technique to be done on in-ground trees that are 20 to 30 years old. They're getting a little old, they're getting a little slow, they really need a little bit of a kickstart. And what he recommends, believe it or not, and this is just one method of doing it, is that you can chop your tree all the way down to the base and reinvigorate, rejuvenate the tree. And what happens is when you chop a tree, or at least a fig, all the way down to the base, is that you get new shoots that come up. And these new shoots that come up are often very vigorous, very healthy, and it gives the tree a nice foundation, a nice base to build off of, to then rebuild that structure and rebuild that productivity that was once lost. Now, this is not everybody's cup of tea, right? Not everyone has a 20 to 30-year-old in-ground tree, and it's not always recommended everywhere. You know, you may still have a 30, 40, even 50-year-old tree that's super vigorous, depending on where you guys live. But certainly in pots and in containers, I've noticed this very often because we have so many trees here on the patio, and I've been growing so many different trees, so many different figs, that over the years I've realized that just some trees just don't do well. And it's just very strange to me that it seems like some of these trees just get off to a really rough, weak start. And here's, by the way, the results of this rejuvenation pruning is that I've gotten this really healthy, vigorous new shoot by coming down here in the base and cutting this all the way down. This was a tree that really, for 3 years, did nothing for me. We did this in June. If you guys remember, by the way, we had a fig tour that we did in June, you know, talking about all these different varieties. We actually did it in the video during the tour. We chopped this tree all the way down to the base, and this was in June, so it's 4 months later. It took a while for the thing to resprout, to send up this new shoot, by the way. It had to come from a really low point, a lower node, maybe even sometimes from the roots. You know, that may be the case, that this is just something that takes a bit of time. But by chopping this all the way back, we no longer have this weak, kind of just gnarly or even damaged wood that's then maybe suppressing or slowing down the vigor or really causing issues. We now have a really fresh, vigorous start. And in fact, I could come in here and pinch this and I would be getting figs, but you know, it's a bit too late in the season for that. But the point is that this is now a new tree. This is now what this variety, Planera, should be. You know, this is not a common thing that happens with this variety. I have many friends who grow Planera, who have vigorous growth, get lots of growth every year, get lots of figs every year, yet my tree for 3 years did nothing. And if I, as an example, and if I did this little experiment and I were to, let's say I propagated 10 different hardy Chicago figs. I took 10 cuttings off my hardy Chicago tree and I propagated them from cutting from the same tree, and I were to make 10 copies, I would say at least one of them, maybe 2, maybe 3, maybe 4 of them are going to be weak, almost an inferior version of the mother tree. And it's just very strange how this happens. Maybe 4 is a bit too high, but I would say at least 1 out of the 10 can be a weak tree. And if you were to compare it years down the road to the mother tree, you'd have a weaker version of it. You'd have a less productive version, a less vigorous version of it. And this is just something that happens. I don't really know exactly why this is the case. Maybe it has something to do with our rooting techniques. Maybe it has something to do with how, you know, the vigor on these trees at a young age can then affect the tree later in life. As an example, I want to show you guys a good example here, because this is a tree, and I want to show you guys another tree that I'm going to be doing this rejuvenation pruning to this year. So you can do this during the growing season like we did in June, where we chopped the Planera all the way down to the base. It resprouted now in October. It looks great. But you can also do this during dormancy. And what we can do is actually come in here. This is my De La Roca, in fact, another variety from Majorca, from Pons. And what we did was we put air layers on this because this is the more healthier, new, vigorous growth. This is the stuff that I would consider reasonable. But this tree, for the size and the age, is also 3 years old. It only put out 2 new shoots, which is very suspect. You can see how big this leaf is, so it's definitely not a weak tree, or at least it shouldn't be a weak tree. But what we're doing here is we're getting these weak points along this section here. I had a pretty bad scale issue one year, but to start this off, we had very vigorous growth, and I recall this tree getting a really nice head start. You can see the node spacing. You can see how vigorous this trunk is. But then when we get up to here, which is kind of where the scale kicked in, is that the node spacing is very close together, significantly close together, to the point where you know that there's some kind of issue here. Then the tree woke up this year, put out this new growth over here, and this is sunburned. This is damaged as well. So in total, this tree seemed a bit weak this year, very uncharacteristic, at least of what I saw in the first year, because of this little issue. Maybe the scale, maybe something got damaged. I don't know, but I'd rather start over from this point. I'd rather cut out the bad wood, and I think we're gonna really pay attention to this come the actual pruning that we do, come dormancy. So what my plan is I'm gonna prune a lot of these trees, but we're gonna pay attention to some of these and say, all right, well, I don't like the look of that branch, and I don't like the way that looks, and maybe that's not going to be too productive. Maybe this is not something we should build off of. Maybe we should take out the smaller, weaker growth. You know, if you come down in here to this tree, we're taking off these 2 air layers to finish my point there, and then we're going to cut this whole thing off right here where all this mess starts. So we're going to take this whole thing out, have it re-sprout from a lower point on healthier, more vigorous wood, and we should have ourselves a more healthier and productive tree in the future. So this is really rejuvenation pruning in a nutshell here, guys. Again, this can be done now, or it can be done during the dormancy process. It's really up to you. I just think this is a beautiful technique that should not just be reserved for trees that are 20 to 30 or 40 years old that really don't put out a whole lot of figs anymore. This is something that we should all be thinking about with our trees, and when we prune. This is like the classic, almost the most important kind of decision-making tool that we can use when it comes to pruning these trees and maintaining the overall health and vigor of these trees. There's an argument to be made, and a lot of people make this argument, that by cutting these trees, let's say our in-ground trees, because we have such a harsh winter here, a lot of our in-ground trees get cut all the way down to the base by the cold. The cold just kills them. And then what happens is they send up all these new vigorous shoots that are very healthy and look phenomenal. In fact, this is how Herman managed to get his really healthy strain of Ischia Black from UC Davis, is that he put an unhealthy tree in the ground, and then the wintertime killed it, and up from the new shoots was a really healthy, vigorous shoot. And that's actually from his stock that we now use. A lot of that growth comes, a lot of that variety that we grow from him, it's now from his original tree. It's no longer from UC Davis directly. It's from him, because he found that new vigorous shoot, and from there it made the variety pretty significantly different. You know, even shook off some of that disease. So we can do the same thing with our in-grounds, and it really just goes to show just how vigorous. I mean, look at these upward growing shoots here. It's actually kind of crazy. So, you know, it's just the thing that I think we really need to think about, and sometimes actually these new shoots from the base are even too vigorous. And I think the argument to be made is that I don't really want to be pruning too much. I want to really keep this wood here if I can, because if I can keep the young, vigorous, healthy wood and start out and use this as a base, I'm going to have a much more productive tree. But some people really love to say, all right, well, let's just chop the tree back down anyway, because then we just get this renewal process every year. And I think that renewal process is nice for the reasons we mentioned. It's just a standard rejuvenation process of pruning, but you're gonna have less productivity that way. It's a guarantee. So anyway, guys, I want to thank everybody here for watching this little thing. I really hope this helps a lot of people. I hope people are not so reluctant to come in here and just say, all right, well, I don't really like this tree. It's 4 years old. Let me just chop the whole thing down to the base and see what happens. I think you guys will really be rewarded. Instead of just completely ditching a tree that you've had for years because it's not doing well, why not try and just chop the thing back and see what happens? So anyway, guys, take care. We'll see you for tomorrow's video. I hope you enjoyed this one. Peace out.